Okay, welcome back to the Process podcast. I am joined today by three beautiful-looking humans, well, two beautiful-looking humans. We have Mr. Karan Sanjeev, we have Mr. Schalk Willem Vujun, and we have Megan Joy McDermott. Welcome, everybody. How are we today?
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good, Karan?
Doing good.
Good. Megan?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, guys. All right, today, our topic for the podcast is going to be the 2024 CrossFit Games. Now, for those people who know what the CrossFit Games is about, obviously we know it's a bit of a kind of somber mood around and kind of like a cloud over the CrossFit Games right now. For those who don't know anything about the 2024 CrossFit Games, we'll do just a very brief review over it. I guess we'll just quickly talk about firstly the winners of it, and then we'll go into the first topic, which I think everyone will want to know about. So the winners this year, before we get into those topics, the winners for the men, we have a new CrossFit Games individual male champion. His name is James Sprague. We have in second place, Dallin Pepper. And in third place even, we have Brent Fikowski. What are your thoughts? Initial, very quick thoughts on the men's podium.
It's nice to see a new name there.
Yeah.
I thought it was refreshing.
Good. Karan, expected it?
No, I didn't expect the young guns to be in the top three. I wanted Fikowski to finally get the gold.
Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed that he sort of lost the lead in the last two events and that 200 points was available in such a short period of time.
Yeah. Schalk?
Yeah, same as Meg. I think it's nice to see a change at the top. Quite surprised of how big the jump was from where he finished, let's say, last year. Not sure where he finished last year, but obviously
He was
going
24th
from
last year, somewhere around
going
there.
from
Yeah.
that to first place in a short time is quite impressive. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Karan. I did want Brent to win for
Yeah.
sure. It was nice to see him in the leader's jersey. I feel like it's a position that he has been in numerous times. I think he's worn it 3 times before this games, and it was good to see him wear it for multiple events. And yeah, unfortunately lost on that last event. But yeah, I think it was a harsh way to lose the leader's jersey and the overall lead in first place with a workout which was essentially the same workout twice.
Right.
But yeah, definitely refreshing to see a new name on the top of the leaderboard. And like you said, young guns, which is cool to see them coming through. Okay, women, we have in first place the absolute GOAT, Tia Claire Toomey. Is it 7 times now?
Yes.
Freak. Second place, we have Gabby Magala. And in third place, we have Emily Rolfe, 2 GoRuck athletes. There you go.
Wow.
In the first year of the GoRuck CrossFit Games.
Hmm.
What do we think, Meg, of the female podium? Are you surprised with Tia's return
No.
after having a Willow?
No, not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Expected her to be back up there at the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, 7 years is many.
Yes, it is many.
It
You're
is
correct.
many years. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
But again, it would be cool to see someone kind of challenge her more.
Mm.
But obviously Laura Horvath stepped out,
Yep.
so didn't
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, well, I
match
get
this
yeah.
year.
We'll speak about that as
Yeah.
well later on in terms of worthy champions versus an asterisk this year versus people who pulled out whether through injury or through choice.
Yeah.
How about Gabby Magala? You guys been watching her journey at all over the last few years?
I've been following I think she and Laura both started a YouTube channel separately.
Yeah.
And they've been training together quite a bit. So it was nice to
Yeah.
see her up there after all the hard work she's put in. So
Yeah. I remember my first time when I met Gabby Magala, I was on a Nocco camp in Iceland, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm a teen athlete." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then I remember, so we were all just like kind of doing team workouts together, and she's like, "So I'm not going to join. I'm going to do my own thing." I remember thinking, I'm like, "Here we go." And then suddenly she like started smashing out like ridiculous weights and like huge sets of chest to bars and muscle-ups. I was like, okay, maybe she's actually legit. And then here she is a few years later on the
how old is she
at
now?
second place. She's still young.
Yeah.
She's still young. She was in the teens category before. So yeah, I think she's like in the Haley Adams
Mid-20s.
Okay.
eras, yeah. But she's very solid and good to see her moving up there. And then I guess probably the biggest surprise on the women's side is Emily Rolfe.
Yes.
But super consistent, always there. I guess she's always been known for like her engine, her running ability, and like kind of the workouts you expect to see at the CrossFit Games, and kind of always gets bumped down with high skill workouts or heavy loads. So good to see her. Hashtag working weaknesses. over the off season.
Yeah.
And then we have, last but not least, we have the teams.
Yeah.
In first place. This is actually probably a bit of a surprise, this leaderboard going into it. Didn't think these guys would end up on top, but very happy they did, which is Iron Raw CrossFit Mayhem Thunder. That is a mouthful. That is a team from Down Under consisting of Cara Saunders, Emily DeRoy, Khan Porter, and James Newbury.
Yeah.
So one young gun and 3 old dogs, but they crushed it. It was cool to see them come together and nail that. Second place, we had CrossFit Torian Mayhem, which is Roy Stern's team, who had been multiple years as a team. I know they replaced one of their team members this year with Jack Jeffries, I think his name is. But he was very, very solid as well. And in third place, who I think a lot of people had picked as their winners, were Peak 360 CrossFit, which was Noah Olsen's team, which has a lot of seasoned games vets on there. Now, what do you guys think of that podium?
I think it's really cool. It's the first time that Australian team or Oceanic team has been on the podium, and for 2 of them to be on the podium.
Yeah.
So I really thought that was kind of cool. It was a nice change up.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, it's also the first time that I think, I don't know the exact team names, but CrossFit Mayhem, I think the main team, and CrossFit Invictus haven't been on the podium.
Wow.
There was a stat that came out that they haven't been on the podium, both teams.
Invictus had a rough
Where
start
did
for
Invictus
sure.
finish?
I think
Sixth,
fourth or fifth.
somewhere between the
Yeah.
4th to 6th area.
I think they just missed out. It was quite close also going into the last event.
Yeah.
Because I don't watch the team's events, but I was following leaderboard and I saw the last event. I think it was like a 4-point difference between second and third, and I think the last event flipped them. I think Peak 360 was in second, and then they got flipped, right?
Yeah.
So
the points were first place 624, second place 588, and third place 582. So a 6-point spread.
So that was a 10-point win in the last event that flipped it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's also the first time only 1 American team versus 2 American teams have been on the podium. So again, it's a refreshing shake-up.
Yeah, for sure. I also think, and no disrespect to teams and the winners and the podiums, but I also think it's probably I feel like it's been the weakest team field that I have seen in a long time. I don't know. And that again could be taken in a very disrespectful way. I think when you look at like strength of field, you kind of look at a lot of the individual athletes who have maybe competed years previous and dropped into teams or moved to teams. It just feels like this year, like there wasn't a lot of big names in there. I think the big names were kind of focused around those 3 teams anyway. I think a lot of media was on the Aussie team and on Peak 360, and I guess kind of everyone else was kind of erased out of the question.
I think the Invictus teams had quite a bit of coverage as well.
For sure. And,
like Chandler Smith's
team.
Yeah.
But then after day one, well, I mean, not day one, the actual day one that happened, they were kind of, I think everyone just dismissed them at that point because it was a poor start to the games for them. Anyways, okay, that is the podium. Let's get into what probably people don't really want to talk about, but unfortunately the cloud which is covering the CrossFit Games right now, 2024, is unfortunately the passing of Lazar Ðukić. Now, for those people that don't know, the first event was actually called Lake Day. It was a 3.5-mile run, followed up with an 800-meter lake swim from one end of the lake straight across to the other side. Lazar Ðukić was sitting in about second or third overall in terms of the men, second place. And about anywhere between like 50 to 60 meters from the finish line, Lazar had essentially just disappeared from TV coverage. The commentators were talking about him. He was clearly in the back of a lot of video footage. He was the centerpiece on quite a lot of the footage as well. And then suddenly he just he disappeared and essentially has drowned. And I think we got to wait and see what the actual results are there of the autopsy. But what has happened is that one of the athletes had passed away, first time ever happening at the CrossFit Games. Of course, extremely sad, and there's been a lot of media around it, and I don't think we're going to get into necessarily our personal feelings on the Lazar Ðukić thing. I think we're all in agreement that how sad, and feelings of grief, also some feelings of maybe frustration, anger at the whole situation. But I want to look at it from a standpoint of us being almost like analysts in this scenario. So, of course, to the whole Lazar Ðukić situation, to the Ðukić family, rest in peace to Lazar. And I hope whatever results come from the third party and police investigation, of course, provide some closure and some change going forward for athlete safety. But yeah, very, very, very sad day for CrossFit and the entire CrossFit community. So, I think it's a time that the CrossFit community can hopefully pull together. Of course, a lot of divided opinions here at the moment. Everyone very emotional. Some people are rational as well at the moment. And I think it's important that we do keep a level head, see it from a level playing field, look at both sides of the story, because there are a lot of people involved and affected right now. None more so than the Ðukić family. So, prayers are with them and love goes to them as well.
I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode with a quick shout out to our sponsors, Today Well Spent. I've been using this journal for 2 years and it has made a massive impact on my physical, but mostly my mental well-being. It is a guided journal backed by neuro and behavioral science, which I actually didn't know at the time. It has questions for you to answer at the start of the day, at the end of the day, end of every week, end of every month. And it's brought so much self-awareness to me of the things that positively and negatively impact my life. So if you're someone who cares about your physical and your mental well-being, which I think you do because you listen to this podcast, then go and grab yourself a Today Well Spent. Use the discount code THEPROCESS, one word in capitals, to get your discount.
Okay, let's talk about the events. Okay, let's try and keep it, like I said, from an analytical standpoint here. We're going to mainly talk about the individuals today. So we're going to talk about the men and women's field, and we'll talk about the workouts. So I know we've got a lot of listener questions come in, and a lot of them are really around the whole Lazar Ðukić situation. So we will go over a few of those. And again, we'll come from a standpoint of try not to get our personal feelings mixed in here, but as best as we can. But of course, can accept them if they come in. So we've gone over what happened already. I think where a lot of the questions are coming in was, what was the initial response, initial reaction from everybody? So when we talk about this, we know what's happened, okay? Somebody has drowned in the lake. Then what essentially happened at this point was that athletes, organizers, everything was cut off for the day. They then met later on. This we know through a Dave Castro video that he put up, is that he called everyone back in, teams, athletes, coaches, or I think he said agents a few times. I don't know if they were present in the meeting, split them up into separate groups. And then they basically needed to decide if the CrossFit Games is going ahead or not going ahead. So they split up into individual men, individual women. We had the teams one side and we had coaches one side. They all kind of liaised with a head, and they had nominated somebody to come forward to represent their groups. At the end of the day, they ended up going with, I think it was a stat of about 80% said they wanted to compete, if I'm not mistaken, and the other 20% had pulled out. So we already know just on the leaderboard that this kind of pulling out had happened throughout the weekend. So some people chose to continue, but then later pulled out retrospectively. So we ended up having 7 women pull out of the 40 total that had entered at the beginning. And then for the men, we actually had 5 pull out for, whether it's mental health reasons, their own emotional reasons, they had pulled out. We had 2 other athletes who actually pulled out through injury. So Victor Hoffer pulled out. He didn't even start the CrossFit Games. And we had Arthur Semenov, who also unfortunately got injured in the clean ladder. So 7 from the women's side and 7 from the men's side. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think in terms of the response of CrossFit? Was it dealt with in the right way for the situation at the time? Was the timeline okay? Was the way they went about it okay? Was the communication to the athletes, spectators, public okay? What do you guys think? What are your initial thoughts on it all when you were first watching it?
I think with the decision to go through with the games, I think in my opinion, it was the right decision, because I think there's a lot more behind the scenes that goes into it, from all different parties, in terms of CrossFit, the organization itself. There's a lot of, obviously, I guess one of the main reasons was all the financial implications that it would have. So
Sponsors
it makes
and all that as well.
Sponsorships, and all of the the village that's there. So all these smaller brands that have set up their set up shop in the vendors village. And then more so from also the athletes' perspective, a lot of the athletes, I think it was the the right decision to allow the athletes to choose if they wanted to compete over the weekend or withdraw. And you could also withdraw in one event but come back in the next event. In previous games, if you withdrew from one event, that was you basically withdrawing from the competition. But this year you're allowed to come back as and when you please. They also took out the initial cut that was supposed to happen after Chad. So they only had one cut, I think it was on the Sunday. They thinned the field down to 30 people, but there were only 32 people playing anyway. So I think it was the right decision to allow the athletes, because a lot of hard work, we know how much hard work it goes in behind the scenes for athletes to get to the games, and a lot of livelihoods depend on it. But at the same time, I also understand athletes, they want to pay their respect in their own way. And if they do pull out, I completely understand that side as well. It depends on how they are financially and how much this means to them in terms of future sponsorships or what it means to their career. So it was the right decision to allow the athletes to do what they wanted. In terms of, I guess, what I'm hearing from social media or what I see posts and like comments of people of how it was handled, personally I disagree, or like I didn't like the tribute for Lazar. I think it should have been done much in a better way, in a better fashion. I think it was not well handled, in my opinion, but apart from that, I think the decision to go ahead of the games was the right call.
I think it's also important to at least acknowledge that Lazar Ðukić, who is Lazar's brother, had also given the blessing for the competition to go ahead. Now, whether he felt that his hands were tied because he essentially had 198 athletes looking at him, asking, like, waiting, maybe he felt pressure, who knows, but he did give a blessing, as well as the Ðukić family, for the CrossFit Games to go ahead. What do you think, Meg?
I think initially it made sense to me that everything should go ahead. It made sense to me to ask the athletes, but obviously I'm not in their shoes. And then through social media and hearing how difficult that decision was and how big of a responsibility that was, and in the emotional state that they were in, I don't know if that responsibility should have been put on their shoulders.
As you say, HQ should have made a call.
Should have made a call and stuck by it, regardless of whether it was to continue to not. Whatever that decision would be, I think if they took ownership of that, I think that would have been more admirable than them just being like, okay, well, we've messed up. This mistake has happened because of us, and now you guys make a decision to fix it. I think it would have been more taken a better leadership role if they had made the call and made the decision and said, okay, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to go forward.
I think.
And if that was to continue, awesome. I agree. I think it was a right decision to continue. But again, I don't think they continued in the right way. Like what you said with the tribute. I don't think that tribute was even close to what was needed.
Or deserved, yeah. I agreed.
Yeah.
I think what you were saying, Karan, the fact that athletes were allowed to withdraw if they wanted to for an event and come back if they wanted to. So no athletes that did withdraw ever came back. I know from the men's side, I know Adler had pulled out straight away. I'm pretty sure Cornaye pulled out straight away. I know Lazar Ðukić, of course, pulled out straight away. I know Moritz Fiebig and Guy Mahiros tried to go through a few events. You could just see it was a lot emotionally for those guys. Even when they were trying to give it their physical best, you could just tell they weren't there with it. So those guys had pulled out a few events in. From the women's side, I think Victoria Campos had pulled out after the second event. Elisa Foliano as well. Horvath pulled out immediately, I believe. Same with Karan Freyova. Danny Spiegel pulled out eventually. Emma Tall after 2 events, and Ariel Lowen just before the clean ladder as well. So, there was, I mean, you could see the grief on everyone's face, and like you could see people dealing with it in separate ways. I agree with you guys that the tribute to Lazar Ðukić was genuinely like the least they could do is literally what they did. since seen much more heartfelt and thought out tributes on social media, which has been nice to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like I get it. They're under the gun. It's fast. Like it's a really quick turnaround, but I feel like they could have
Oh my goodness.
put something slightly better out than that.
They
yeah.
have years and years of footage of.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have done the
For
most
sure.
beautiful video tribute just with their personal content that CrossFit Games have.
Yeah.
Like they could have just done something with a little bit more effort into it.
Yeah.
I think
For
that
sure.
same afternoon, I think there was about 3 or 4 YouTubers that made a 4, 5, 6 minute compilation
Yeah.
in his memory. And I mean, if
they can
one
do it.
person by themselves can do it, like surely a whole media team
Yeah.
can come up with something better than a
Yeah.
picture up on a
I
screen,
also
right?
think allowing the athletes in that moment to come forward and to say something would have set a better tone moving forward as well, because athletes wanted to voice, or if they did want to voice at the end of their event wins or at the end of their heat wins and things like that, their interviews was more about the stories they wanted to share. And I think if they held that moment at the beginning with that tribute, it could have helped them moving forward through the weekend a lot smoother.
Yeah, I agree. I think those, and bless all the athletes that still put themselves through it.
100%.
I think it's I think again, don't want to get too personal. I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it's an incredibly tough decision whether to go forward or whether to not. But yeah, those interviews after each individual workout it was painful to listen to, because you could see 90% of the athletes who are getting interviewed were like, they were just so careful not to be tone deaf. They were so careful not to say the wrong thing, even though they might not be feeling that way in the moment. You're still like you said, Karan, I think these athletes, and what people do forget is that these athletes have dedicated their life to it. Yes, we lost like an incredible life, but sometimes you still do feel elation in the moment. You feel happy in that moment, and then like, oh shit, I can't be selfish here. I need to pull myself back. And like, that's a really hard thing to do. When someone's asking you, you've just got 100 points, maybe just moving to first or moving to a podium contention spot, then suddenly you have to remember to be like selfless and think about, thousands of people watching in the stadium, like the hundreds of thousands of watching online. Like that would have been a tough thing to try and manage and navigate. But I agree, maybe if they had the opportunity to speak, whether it was even just amongst the athletes, didn't have to be televised, didn't have to be showcased, more so for the Ðukić family and for your fellow competitors, I think that could have definitely been something that could have helped people navigate the situation a little bit better.
Yeah, I think most of the athletes handled themselves really well. Given the situation, I think they were respectful. After they won an event or if there was a shakeup on the leaderboard, I think they celebrated solemnly. But I think from the CrossFit side, it felt as though, at least for me, as they moved on onto day 2, as nothing happened.
Right.
And that didn't sit right with me. But I do agree that the timeline of like them canceling day 1 events was the right call. Because you can't make any decision, in the moment. You need to go back to the drawing board and decide. But I do agree with Meg that CrossFit should have taken more accountability, first with the incident, and then shown leadership in making the call versus putting the athletes in the hot seat to make that decision. So they make the call and then give the athletes a choice whether they want to, participate or not.
It's going ahead. You're either with us or it's okay. You can sit out. Yeah.
Because
agreed.
from what I'm seeing from a few posts with Brent, what he recently posted is when it goes too far, that's when they want to collaborate. And if I take Brent's words as fact, I read that post recently, like today, after you mentioned it. So it's like, if you want to collaborate, you got to have this process set throughout the year and not just when shit hits the fan.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think again, what Brent and Pat have started up with the PFAA, which is like a union almost for athletes, for essentially looking out for athlete safety and fairness across the playing field. I mean, so I know Brent actually reached out to me when he first started up, and like in that post that he puts up, you lose interest very fast when there's zero response or zero sort of like you don't gain any traction with what it's like. Everything is met with like a full stop. You ask a question, we got it, don't worry about it. And I was very much in the same boat. Like I tried to get on the first few calls, they were good, a lot of promising stuff, and it's just like, oh well, like we went to CrossFit with 50 things that we wanted to get changed, and they came back and said yes to 5 of them. and it was like having a lane number, or moving the assault bikes so they're in an even line. It was like such small minimalistic things, and like the bigger picture things are just like, don't worry, we have a team that's gonna handle that, whether that's a medical team or whatever it might be. Okay, moving forward, what could be improved? What went wrong? Like why did this even happen in the first place?
I think, I mean, this is just going through some investigations that I've like been watching over the weekend, and it's evident to see that like, and they even said, like Don Fowles said this not long ago, that they're intentionally not putting more money into the CrossFit Games. So they're intentionally trying to spend less money on the CrossFit Games and trying to put more into education and training and affiliates. Which makes sense. But it seems like the areas where they've pulled back in their spending has been the support teams for the athletes. And looking over the years, you can physically see the water safety decline from about 10 years ago to where it was this year.
Yeah.
So I think massively that has been the number one issue of where they can improve on. However, there are so many people upset, obviously at the passing, but also the lack of accountability and the lack of forethought that something like this could happen. I'm worried, not on behalf of CrossFit Games, but I'm worried about the CrossFit Games future.
Yeah.
I don't know where this is going to go, and I don't know what the right decision is to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think Andrew Hiller put up all those screenshots of like previous footage from live feeds, and it definitely shows that there's less safety personnel within the water.
Yeah.
I don't really know what's on the shore, whether the fire department's there, whether the scuba team's there, whatever it might be, whether it's open water, lake, whatever it might be. But for sure, you can see there's definitely less people there, less safety personnel. I think from my own standpoint, I think someone has actually asked me this over the last few days, is like, have I ever felt like I was unsafe at a CrossFit competition? Having been at the games twice, having competed in things like Dubai and Wadapalooza, and honestly, like, no, I don't think I've ever felt unsafe. I've been a part of plenty mass start style events. I've done swimming under fatigue. I've done running under fatigue, like being out in the desert on a 38-kilometer bike ride where I don't see anyone for a long time when I'm on a bike ride. And yeah, I've never felt like I was in a situation where I might not be okay. And I guess that's also something to be said. I don't want to just sit here and just bash CrossFit for the obvious negligence that we see in this particular situation, which just happened to go really, really wrong for them. I think in the past, I've always felt safe, and I think a lot of athletes would also say that. But again, we don't see the backstory of it. We don't see, like, does the money actually decrease going towards the health and safety? Do we actually spend less money over there? I also... It is horrendous when you watch the video of what happened to Lazar and you watch it back and you see things like a spectator jumping in, trying to help, trying to save, they get shooed away. The person's on a paddleboard, or whether they're, registered health and safety lifeguard, whatever, whatever the certifications need to be in that position. It just, like, even that is quite like a scary, harrowing thing. The fact that the paddleboarder goes over to where Lazar Ðukić goes under and, like, basically gives a thumbs up and goes back, and we're okay. It's not a problem. Like, don't worry. I also feel for that paddleboarder, whoever is on that paddleboard, like, however everyone else is feeling, that person is going to be feeling probably twice as bad, and that's also a horrible thing to think about. And this is why, like, social media for me is like, can be a really poisonous place. Like, they're probably looking at all these things online and just thinking like, well, I can't even say what they're going to be thinking, but yeah, it's not nice. Like, no one wanted this to happen in any situation. And yeah, like I said before, I guess like the third party investigation will really show where the negligence was, if it was meeting prerequisites for an event like this. I think it's also something to say, and like, again, I'm definitely not saying it's okay at all, but deaths do happen in sport.
I was just about to say,
deaths, absolute, like, these, some of them are freak accidents. You trip over, you hit your head in a rock, and you know that's life done. This one for sure was avoidable. Absolutely, it was. There was definitely negligence apparent, but also deaths do happen in sport, even in a controlled setting or the most controlled settings that you can see. And I think what we see here is that the CrossFit Games is a multi-day event, which makes it much more difficult. Often a triathlon, an Ironman, where these events, obviously these deaths might occur, is that the event goes on because it's almost retrospective to the people who've already gone past, which also sounds terrible, that those people who are now in the bike leg or the run leg don't even know what's going on behind them. And that person almost feels forgotten about, but it does happen. And it's just the first time the CrossFit community has ever had to deal with it, and the CrossFit Games staff and company and brand has ever had to deal with it. And it's just new ground to navigate as well. Like, it's going to be extremely interesting. I agree. Like, I guess I worry for the CrossFit Games future. I think if the CrossFit Games were to cease to exist, there'll be something else that pops up anyway. But, you know, at the same time, I'm interested almost to see what happens and what the future is going to be there. But yeah, what were you going to say about, you know, these events happening?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I was going to say that I agree with the fact that hindsight's 50-50, right? But with the fact that in previous games and
hindsight's normally 100%.
It's actually 2020.
2020, yeah.
Oh, my bad. I got
It's okay.
I got the saying wrong. We get what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, in retrospect, it makes sense. So what you said about, you know, you felt safe at previous games, it takes an incident to happen to, I guess, critique and analyze the safety measures put in place. And then now you look at what happened. I agree with the fact that death does happen in sports, and the sport moves on. I know it's a harsh statement, but that is true. It's a fact. The sport is bigger than an individual. But the reason for frustration and anger that comes from this incident is that this, like you said, could have been prevented and should have been prevented with everything that we saw on live stream with the live coverage. You know, nobody ever wanted this to happen. And we see with different events or different sports, whether that be a triathlon or an open water swim, the amount of personnel that's on or in the water. You know, I can't imagine myself being that person on the paddleboard that shoot the person away and then went and checked and then, you know, give a thumbs up, whatever it was. But I guess having more people out there, whether that be safety or medical staff, or even, you know, when the spectators are, you know, saying something, stopping the event versus having the event continue for the next 15-20 minutes and then sending out a boat to do their, I guess, investigation. So the reason why I guess it hit so close to home, outside of the fact that we're all involved in the sport, is also because this could have been prevented. But yeah,
I think that's exactly where the frustrations lie. I think people can acknowledge and accept the fact that deaths do happen in sport. But the fact that this was an incident that, I mean, Mark and I went back and watched like the 300 meters that led to
there were
that
signs.
point. And there were signs that he was really struggling. And I think just an intervention of anyone being like, "Are you okay?" He can always have turned around and been like, "No, I'm good."
I remember it happened at the run swim when it was around the pier in Huntington Beach, when Easy Muhammad was on like the paddleboard, and like people went over and checked because there was plenty of people there. Like, you know, granted, his situation was a bit more of a funny situation because he just literally couldn't be asked to swim anymore. But you know, it just shows that.
Just to check in.
Like I said, I have no idea what the prerequisites were for the people on the paddleboards in the lake in Texas. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the investigation turns up, and like hopefully it can shed some light on the whole situation. But what do you guys propose going forward? Of course, we're probably all going to say spend more money on it. Like, that's the first thing you probably need to do. You can't neglect health and safety. But like Schalk, what would you change if you were, or what would you like to see changed going forward?
For that, I'm not going to speak about that specific event or what happened there. I think as a whole, yes, I think the majority of CrossFit is obviously not focused on the CrossFit Games. There's obviously affiliates, people doing CrossFit as just their training methodology.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, the thing that brings people in is still the sporting side. That's still the thing that captures people first, and then they get in. So if you're going to claim for the CrossFit Games to be a sport and essentially the world championship
yeah.
of that sport, you need to handle it in the exact same way. I think communication with athletes, I think throughout the year, I think the whole idea of being unknown and unknowable, it was cool in the beginning, but I think now it's just a little bit run down. I think the sport has evolved so much out of, I think it obviously started in the USA, but now there's a lot of, I think, overseas influence and stuff as well. So the sport as a whole, training wise, people are training differently for the sport specifically.
Yeah.
So I think incorporating what people all over the world are doing, and just communicating essentially, whether that's events or I think in the same post that Brent said, like they asked for specifics on how much time will they spend outside, and they were like, don't worry about it. We'll tell you when you get there, but you'll be fine. And that's just a little bit, I mean, you're playing with people's lives at the end of the day. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the unknown and unknowable is great. I like it. It's kind of what makes CrossFit very interesting for a lot of us and keeps us coming back. But there is a point where you're just like, okay, so it's like getting a little bit dangerous now, for sure. And I can see that. So I guess, would you guys say there's anything else that you would like to change or you would like to see change from from HQ, from coming down into the affiliates and into athletes? Like, was there anything that you guys would like to see?
I think a lot, like Schalk said, a lot more communication throughout the year, and communication with the affiliates, with the athletes, with everyone involved. I think having open communication and actually taking that, feedback in to make decisions, so they actually have a voice. And then I think treating it like, I think Schalk nailed it, treating it like a professional sport and actually investing money into safety. Even just seeing, how local triathlons and local meets happen here, you have a lot more safety protocols put in place versus what was present at this year's event one at the games. And then I guess even just questioning the programming a bit, I think, going off of Schalk's point of unknown and unknowable, people were questioning putting a swim after, a 3.5 mile run. And they were like, a triathlon itself has a swim first for a particular reason. And if you have a swim after a run in that heat, you're putting yourself up for, I guess, that kind of situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, the thing that everyone has said now is, if you feel like shit during a run, you stop. If you feel like shit during a swim, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like, thank God there wasn't 2 deaths at the games, but, I think Jeffrey Adler was the first guy to enter the water.
Yeah.
And holy shit, he was all over the shop.
Yeah,
I actually saw a post from Chris Hinshaw. He did a live on Instagram, I think today or last night. And he's talking about the data on Jeff Adler's watch. And it's literally like he's drawing like a star within the map, within the lake. And he's literally swam 100 meters here, gone 200 meters to the left, and then gone 100 meters back towards the start point, and then come back all the way. And then Chris, who is Jeff Adler's endurance coach or aerobic coach, whatever he wants to call himself, Jeff said that he didn't even remember being in the lake.
Wow.
So like that feeling of like, or the knowing like, okay, the athlete is disorientated. If you were watching him, it seems, I mean, I was watching and going like, okay, he is not in a good place.
Yeah.
Also, at no point did I ever think he's going to drown, because I know that he is a competent swimmer. And also, he was only one of probably 3 to 4 athletes in the water at a time. And all I could see was a paddleboarder moving next to them. So I didn't think he was going to drown. But then I also didn't take into account the point where there was up to 80 athletes in the water at one time.
Right.
So I guess moving forward, like, I don't know, do you send a paddleboarder in the water every time an athlete comes in and they just track by the side of them? Is that like a solution going forward?
I think even the question of a paddleboard,
Yeah.
it's not exactly a life-saving device.
Yeah.
Like, a paddleboard's a really hard piece of equipment to like get another person on it anyway. Like kayaks and jet skis that have the right devices on the back. Like, it wasn't even the correct water safety equipment. There weren't any flotation devices with them either.
Mm.
So I think regardless of if they needed more, for sure, but they didn't even have the right personnel out there. But going back to the programming, I think you can make anything as difficult as you want to make it if you have the right safety
I agree
procedures with that. Because I think a run into swim is very hard. But a lot of things that CrossFit do are very hard. So I mean, we didn't do it. We didn't get to experience the heat. I don't know how hot that water was. I don't know how disorientating it was. I know also that they said that the sun was rising at the worst part of the horizon, so they couldn't even spot
Well, I think
where they were going.
they moved the finish line 3 times,
right?
Because there was like issues with spotting and seeing,
So that's also disorientating as well as the heat. So, but all that in consideration, if there were the right safety measures in place, I think you can make it as difficult as you want, and people can just stop.
True. I think this is a good question as well that I heard was, at what point does an athlete stop? Should they ever be told to stop?
No.
Or is it just like an athlete's mindset is to finish when you're like at the top of the game, top 40 in the world? You're just gonna literally put your body on the line. Is that it? I mean, you've seen it with like your Cara Saunders. You've seen it with like your Annie Thorisdottir when they were doing Murph events and like they could barely stand up, but they're still going. They're literally plowing through, or heat stroke, and obviously this one, whether it was some sort of respiratory failure, heart attack, or whatever it might have been, or he literally just drowned. Who knows? But is there a point where like people have the right to step in and be like, you're done now, you need to get out?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think if you could ask them a question and they can't respond,
it was the same thing in boxing, right? If somebody gets knocked down 4 times and they have the 10-second count, you can't stand on 2 feet, you're done.
You're done.
But I mean, obviously, what do you do then?
On the same page, I was thinking with boxing as well, you have your corner that can throw in the white flag for you, the white towel for you. And you have someone that's looking out for your best interests. Just thinking out loud, but I don't know how that would be applicable in CrossFit when you're the only one in the lake because you don't have your coach with you there. But if you have like trained professionals or safety medical team there that can spot certain things that shows you're in danger or in trouble, a trained eye basically.
Well, I think it comes down to the prerequisites we were talking about before, like who was on that paddle.
Exactly.
Have they said?
No.
If it was trained people, if it was,
I heard that they might have been marshals, not trained professionals. But we don't know yet.
I think like as soon as like your hand touches a paddleboard, you're done. Sort of thing, or like as soon as you ask for help, you're done. If
you set rules like the people on or guess in the water with you, and these are the officials. If they tell you you're done, you're done.
I think also
you can't argue with that.
You can communicate that to athletes. So if you say to the athletes, look, these are the professionals. If you get to a certain point and you can't physically respond to them, if you can't give them a thumbs up, if you can't verbalize to them that you're okay, we will pull you out of this. I think they 100% should have the right to do that.
I think just one thing that will make that super hard is it's a race at the end of the day. See, if you think
with
about
a lot of money on the line as well.
Like if you're running a 1500 meters at the Olympics,
right?
Firstly, it's fucking hard to be like,
thumbs up,
answer a question. And secondly, as you said, there's obviously a lot on the line. So at what point is it like, listen, I need some help right now, or I'm just a little bit tired.
I think that also comes with like the trained eye, what we were saying.
True.
If someone's completely disorientated and their 1500 is not a straight line, or they're completely out of their way. I think that's pretty obvious.
I think all good points. Moving forward with it though, and I think we'll speak about later on at the end, like the future of the sport. But I guess going back to it, I think Karan, you brought up the tests themselves. I think a lot of people are going to always have an asterisk next to the 2024 year. Of course, number one reason being the fact that Lazar Ðukić passed away during the 2024 games, but also because 14 athletes pulled out. And most notably out of those 14 athletes were the 2 previous champions. So Jeff Adler and Laura Horvath. So when you look at the men's and women's final podium, like, do you guys think that the fittest man and woman on earth prevailed? at the end of the day? Or do you think that, like, do you think they are a worthy champion for the 2024 title of fittest on earth? Or do we put an asterisk next to their name?
I think, in my opinion, they are. Because I think anyone, or not anyone, I think the top 5 or top 10 that make it at the games at the end of the weekend, any one of them is worthy of being a champion or being at the top of the podium. I think definitely a lot of luck needs to go your way in terms of programming. Like with Brent, if the last 2 events were different, or it wasn't 200 points, he would have been at the top of the podium. So I think, the top 5, top 10 are worthy of standing atop the podium. And the next thing is also, I've lost my train of thought. Come back to me. I just blanked right there.
Well, I think maybe one thing you might have been talking about was the fact that we actually missed 2 tests.
Yeah.
So we did miss 2 tests. So those 2 tests that we missed, I'm not sure what they would have called the second test, but honestly, thank God they didn't put it in.
Hammer down,
something like that. But that was 4 rounds to time of 50 tire hits with the sledgehammer, 14 sandbag throws and a get over the tire with a sandbag, and then 5 tire flips, 4 rounds for time. And the third one that we missed, which I think that second workout is just a bit of a grit grunt workout, and it's going to be very, very close across the finish line. So I think your current top 5 guys and top 5 women would still be like there or thereabouts for the most part. But I think your Amanda 45, when you're looking at 45 muscle ups, and then you look at something like the men's leaderboard, like, your James Briggs, Dallin Peppers, Brent Fakowski, Jason Hopper are amazing at muscle ups. But there are guys in the field who are damn good at muscle ups and better than them and could have shaken up that leaderboard. Your guys like your Pat Vellners, your Ricky Garrads would definitely stand. Your Austin Hatfield, who won the last 2 events, probably stood a really good chance on that event to take 100 points as well. So, yeah, I guess that question goes in there with the 2 workouts that we're missing, taking it down to just 10 tests.
But we could say that about any year.
For sure.
So you could say that about any year but the program was aligned to suit the people that fell out on top.
Yeah.
I think also the reason why I would deem them as worthy to be on the podium is because that's the weekend. And they're the people that came out on top with everything that they faced.
They played the cards that they were dealt at the end of the day.
Exactly. And everyone was almost not in the same position, but everyone was going through that weekend together, and they all had the same circumstances. So it wasn't like it was any different, I don't know, for each person, but yeah, it's a harsh thing to say. And I did see a post that kind of summed it up, that there were technically no winners this weekend. And I agree with that too.
I think so. I recollected my train of thought. I went blank there for a second. I agree with most of what you said, but I do think like a small asterisk in the sense that it wasn't the same circumstance for everyone. I think some competitors pulled out because of I guess the relationship with Lazar. So it was slightly different circumstances for different people. But I agree with the point that in different seasons, you have different people pulling out for other reasons, whether it be injury or personal reasons. So the people that end up might be different each year. And I think at the end of the day, I think there shouldn't be an asterisk. I think the people who won the games this year are legitimate champions, because you don't want to take away from them as well, as to all the work they have put in. And then the events, the people that are in each year's games always changes, and it just depends. Same as the 2020 CrossFit Games. Right? Because that you had only 5 people actually go to the finals, because you had the online pre-qualifiers before. You had the COVID season. Then you can start thinking about how it was pre-national champ until 2018. Then you had the national champ era, and then you had now you have the semifinals. So you have like different qualification processes, and that's just how it was for each year.
You could say that about any year.
So you can be like, 2019 to 2021 was also an asterisk, right?
I agree. I think both James Briggs and Tia Toomey are worthy winners. Again, like, we will never know what they were going through. We'll never know what any of the AT athletes who were there were actually going through. And it's also, I know some people point the finger and just say they're emotionally dead inside or whatever it might be, and tone deaf for the whole situation. But at the end of the day, it is their job. It's what they do every single day for years and years and years on end. And although it almost sounds ridiculous to say you're celebrating someone's victory and accomplishments in this situation, I think it is still important to celebrate what they've achieved. And I think, Tia winning 7-7 now and James Spray being the new champion, I think it's really cool. And I agree. I do think for the tests that were there on the weekend, your fittest man and fittest woman came out, and it should be celebrated. When and where it should be celebrated, I don't know. I'll get that wrong, because CrossFit will get that wrong, and their sponsors will get that wrong, and they will get it wrong for sure as well. No one's going to get it right.
There's no winning in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. There's always
no
going
right
to be
way to do it.
for sure. And I think
there's a better way to do it.
There is a better way to do it, yes. But yes, you're never going to please everyone, I think. Now, I think when we look at the tests of fitness that were there on the day, so we had originally 12 tests laid out that we know of. Maybe there was more, maybe there was less. But we had 12 tests and we only ran 10 of them. What do you guys think in terms of the tests of fitness? Did we end up, I guess, what we always try and what we look when we look at a competition, you're trying to look at an even set of tests. When you get to the end of the weekend or get the end of a competition, you should have the fittest man, woman, and of course teams stand on top of the podium with the gold medal around their neck. Do you guys think that the CrossFit Games team and Dave Castro achieved a fair and even test of fitness by the end of it?
I'd like to put out two questions there, just to know before I can give my thoughts.
Sure.
The last two events, was that originally planned to be two events, or was it one event and then Dave decided to make that
I think it was
two scored events just to make up more points because of the two castle ones?
I assume it'd be two scored events just because he's done it in the past with like an assault bike and the toaster ring and an assault bike and burpee. It's very, very similar with like a short turn. It was only a 2-minute turnaround.
Okay.
So I assume, and the name of it as well.
Yeah.
24, 21, 18, 15.
Yeah.
It's obviously.
Yeah, I asked because he made the sprint, the track and field as one event.
Yeah.
So I thought he'd separated out the last two just to make it more points on the table to see an exciting finish. And I guess my next talking point would be we did have the clean ladder, which was sort of, I guess, your strength test, but there was no max this year. And I'm pretty sure there's been some form of max lift with a sandbag or the barbell or some sort. So I think that might be a missing element. But sorry, Schalk. Go ahead.
Is the question that it includes the tests that were not done? Are we asking the question about all the tests that was planned to go ahead, or just the ones that actually went ahead?
Friend. You can answer it from a 12 workout perspective, and you can answer it from the actual 10 perspective.
I think if you're going to claim that it was a balanced set of tests at the end of the weekend that people actually did, then you also imply that some of the workouts can just be a whatever workout. Because if you don't do those two, that essentially means, like, let's say a percentage of the workouts then in asterisks does not actually matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because every workout essentially should have a goal behind and something specifically that they are testing.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can say that it might have been planned to be a nice and rounded set of tests, but I don't think at the end of the weekend that all the tests that was done was rounded.
Yeah.
I think even if all the tests were done, I don't think it was fully rounded.
Yeah.
I don't think, like what Karan said, I don't think a big lift was fully tested. It was a sprint clean ladder. It wasn't exactly like a clean ladder. It was more about the sprint component and who could do it the fastest. I think also the squat snatches in Amanda 45 were taken out, and although that wasn't a strengthy movement, it's a big movement in CrossFit.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was fully all round. We also didn't have any rowing or skiing.
You had skiing in the rope climb workout, midline climb.
Midline climb, that's it.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any rowing, which, although they did have a lot of that leading into it.
Yeah.
But still.
So my thoughts on it. Number one, there's 4 running workouts.
Right.
Well, four workouts I had running it. You had leg day, 3.5 mile run. You had the track and field, which had a 1,600 meter run, and then you had the sprints straight after it. And then you also had the 175 meter run within the Ðukić triplet. So there's 4 events of running in it. The other thing that I wasn't necessarily a fan of was the fact that there was 0 hanging from a pull-up bar until day 4, where all 3 workouts they were hanging from a pull-up bar.
Yeah.
So you had toes to bar, you had chest to bar, and then you had bar muscle ups.
It's not fair.
Yeah, could definitely. And again, like if we actually look at how the weekend would have played out, then a lot of the athletes, if a cut was still there, would never have got to touch a pull-up bar as well. So that's something to think about. Of course, it didn't play that way, so the champions are still champions, but just something to think about. The next thing, there was no rower involved. Not a huge like problem for me, to be honest. I just think there was too much bias towards running there. I think workout 2, like I'm gonna say it again, like I'm just happy we didn't see that. Like watching Dave Castro get Trista Smith and Colton Mertens to demonstrate that was painful to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily it was on Instagram Live and I couldn't really see the reactions of the 80 athletes in the background, but that was extremely underwhelming. Like Colton Mertens literally looked like he was about to fall asleep flipping that tire and hitting that hammer against the tire. But I find it tough to say it was a balanced set of fitness. I do think I'm going to go against you and Karan here, Meg, on the cleans, that I think the cleans did test a very, very heavy facet of fitness and lifting, because you had to earn the right to lift really, really heavy.
Yes.
So you had to be able to sprint with, let's call it, moderately heavy loads to these guys, and then earn the right to get to the round of the 111, which was at 325, 345, 365 for the men, and 230, 240, 250, which is heavy for the women as well.
Very heavy.
So I do think that strength was tested. It was just tested in a different way. And honestly, I am stoked that they tested it that way, because I am so sick and tired of just seeing people go 1 rep max snatch, 1 rep max clean and jerk. I mean, last year's format for that was poor. I think with the 20-second window twice, didn't really allow people to express their absolute strength. But again, that's just my personal opinion with that. I actually liked the sprint into a less of a sprint. Like no one was running between the bars, and the one guy that did failed the last clean anyway, Austin Hatfield, who probably should have won that event, and ended up being taken by Justin Medeiros as well, which is ridiculous that he also PR'd his clean by like 10-20 pounds, whatever it was. He's never lifted that weight before. I think 355 is his max, and he lifted 365 like it was, and he got rocked onto his heels on it, still stood up like it was nothing, and won the event, which is awesome. Also, only his second ever event win. Did you know he had more CrossFit Games titles than event wins until that point?
That sparked his comeback the year before, right? When he did a similar clean ladder or a ladder. The event he won, the first event he won 2 years ago. And that, I think, it was the rivalry between him and Pat, and that sparked the comeback, and then he won on the final day. Yeah.
So we're going with a non-balanced set of tests for what we saw, and for even if it was a full set of tests, do you think it was a balanced set of tests?
I'd say across the season,
Agree. So I was waiting for someone to say this. I agree. I whenever someone asks me, oh, was the open balanced? Was the quarterfinals balanced? I said, I can't really give the answer until I see what the CrossFit Games kind of churns out.
Such a good point.
I mean, there's definitely been a shitload of step-ups within this season, that's for sure. And so I mean, whether you did them all, unlike Schalk, or you did them like us. I think I would have to go back and look at the entire year, but I feel like it was a fairly balanced set of tests. I think the CrossFit Games itself was probably lacking a bit of weight to it. And maybe that shows with someone like your James Sprague winning it. Right. I'm not sure, but I also know that Dallin Pepper, Jason Hopper, Pat Vellner, Sam Quant are all strong dudes as well. So, you know, at the end of the day, I still think you're going to find like a very, very similar top 5 for both the men and women's fields when you look at it from that perspective.
The reason why I brought up the clean ladder point of view was Haley Adams and Emily Rolfe. They're always usually actually in the top 5, top 10 fighting. Like I think Emily Rolfe has been fighting for a top 5 for the last few years, but she's missed out because of these events. And that was, I think, probably her worst finish, 20 something. In the clean ladder.
She took 27th.
27th.
Clean ladder. Haley Adams took 31st.
Yeah. So when I saw that Emily Rolfe, or I saw her through the weekend, that she finished 3rd, if we had maybe another strength test, would she still be 3rd? That's why I brought up the clean ladder as one of the points.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, so we're going to go with it's not a balanced set of tests. That's what we're going to finish with.
I agree.
Okay, next piece to finish, we'll kind of start to wrap it up now. I think we've kind of spoken about the winners. We've spoken about the kind of asterisks against some athletes competing, some athletes not competing. We've spoken about, kind of what has happened in the weekend. I think now moving forward, Meg, you kind of touched on it. Like, what is the future of what is the future of CrossFit, and what is the future of a CrossFit Games? I know I have already seen just via social media that there's a number of CrossFit gyms out there who already started to de-affiliate because they don't agree with the negligence that was on show in event 1 and at the CrossFit Games, which I can totally understand. I don't know where we sit currently. I guess I am going to be waiting, and I'm sure Ed will also be waiting until we figure out what the actual news is that comes out of the third-party investigation. Also, just on that, I'll be interested to know if we get full transparency of that, or if CrossFit have hired out a third party to do the investigation. Do they get control of the information that comes out? Kind of like the drug tests they've done in the past, where they kind of drip feed information out. So that'll be interesting to see. But do you think we'll see let's assume that CrossFit Games still goes ahead next year. The 2025 Games is coming and the season will start with the Open. Do you think we'll see less participation in the Open? Do you think we'll see less affiliates hosting the CrossFit Open because of this year's Games?
I think that's going to depend heavily on what happens in the next 5 months.
With the
Well,
investigation?
not 5 months, sorry. Like, obviously up until then, but until any sort of information comes out. Whether there has been untruthfulness in the first couple of days or first couple of hours after the thing happened from their side, I think that's going to obviously be a big factor in it. Or if they withheld information from the community, I think one of the big talking points was the lack of information they gave out, I think, close to the incident. I mean, I was on Instagram looking through comments every 5 seconds to see if anybody who was there made an update. And I think that's also why I think people are getting a bit tired. It seems like it's almost like a very closed off sort of thing when it's preached as a very inclusive community. It's like the community is one thing, but we are a separate entity essentially. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Karan, what do you think?
I think so. Not related to this, but I think it's been on a steady decline. So I've got this. All my thoughts now are from, I guess, Hiller's videos, and might even be Craig Ritchie. I'm not sure, but it's from YouTube videos. There's been a steady decline in numbers in terms of affiliates and in the participation in the Open, pre-COVID and after COVID. So 2014, 2019, when you had a different media team before the media team got fired with all the hype, the participation rates were as highest compared to now. Same thing for the affiliates in terms of like the decline, where I guess the CEO is saying one thing, but the numbers actually point to another thing. And I think that with what happened with this year, the 2024 CrossFit Games, I think there might be that decline will continue into 2025. Also seeing if you see the stats on the age group of people that are taking part in the Open, it's the people that we're not getting the new generation in terms of, the 20-year-olds or the teenagers.
I actually got the stats here, so hold your thought. So from the 18 to 34 age group, from 2023 to 2024, there's been a 1.7% increase from the year. So small. But then when you look at the masters, so that's 35 all the way up to 65 plus, there's been an 11.9 increase. So a lot bigger increase in participation. And then teens has actually gone down 2.5% over the last year.
I think on that, I think people from the age groups are moving up in age group. Does that make sense? So we're not getting fresh blood into the sport. And I also think with other options now for competing, #hybrid athlete, with High Rocks and other options.
You are not a hybrid athlete. I think the only reason you're a hybrid athlete because you have the world record slowest time for High Rocks. High Rocks Pro, that is. Sorry.
Okay, we've gone the entire podcast without roasting me. Let's keep it that way.
I was just about to say, you opened that door.
I know. I thought of myself there. But I think, so I think unless something, not just one thing, I think a lot of things need to change. First, with what happens in the aftermath now, 2024 Games, with how they communicate with everyone, the athletes, the spectators, and then with the affiliates. And then next is with the whole media team, if they can get back to the heights of pre-COVID. Yeah, stuff like that. I think there are a lot of things that need to change for it to get back up in terms of participation.
Thoughts, Meg?
I don't know. Like, I've been seeing a lot of things on social media about how CrossFit needs to take massive accountability and like CrossFit needs to be shut down and there's been like a lot of hype around those kind of conversations.
I don't agree with that stuff, by the way.
No,
That's my personal opinion.
I don't either, which is what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
I think CrossFit.
Sorry for interruption.
That's okay. You're like, I just want to put that out there. But I think a lot of the people are seeing CrossFit as just the sport and not as everything else that it does.
Yeah.
So it's such a small part of everything that CrossFit actually does for affiliates and for training and education and for communities. It's a very small part of it is the actual CrossFit Games. And I think if the whole of HQ had to shut down because of a awful incident and negligence, I think it would be a disservice to a lot of people around the world.
Yeah.
More so than it would be making a point of negligence.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I want to happen with the games. I think there's been a lot of talk of like, oh, why doesn't another competition take over it and run it instead? I don't know.
Yeah. I think I agree with Schalk. Like, I think a lot of it will kind of hinge and balance on what the investigation throws out. I still feel a loyalty towards CrossFit.
Yeah.
Again, like I'm on the fence because I think some things went wrong, but I think they also still do a lot of good things for us. I think from an affiliate standpoint, I don't know if many people know this, but in Asia, we don't get much from CrossFit. You know, I get an email every day, which gives me the workout of the day. I get an email maybe once a week, which tells me about like some affiliate stats here and there. But really, we don't get much. Like, we pay $3,000 a year to have the name CrossFit, and we don't even use the name CrossFit. Our gym's called Coastal. We use the process programming. We don't have the CrossFit tag within our name, so we're technically not utilizing it to that extent, which is a bit silly now I think about it. But at the same time, like, we actually don't really get much from it. I think we get maybe, I'd be able to count on one hand how many drop-ins we get via the CrossFit game, via the CrossFit.com website.
Right.
So I think we've been through stages, you know, when Glassman came out and made some public comments which were got a lot of heat. That was the first point where we questioned affiliation with CrossFit, and I guess this would be another part, another time to kind of reconsider it. But again, like, I'm definitely not like, I don't have like my pitchfork out and like ready for someone's head right now. I just hope the investigation is fair. I hope the investigation brings closure to the family, and I hope it's transparent. That's like the only thing I'm hoping for. So I hope people don't just, you know, abandon ship right now because they're emotional and potentially irrational with thoughts. And I hope the community does band together. I know it's very much like you're either with us or you're against us right now. And you see that clearly on social media, which you all have access to. I just hope the community can band together. And I think one thing that is really nice that you have seen is, you know, the Lazar Ðukić GoFundMe page, which we will link down below, has been amazing to see. I don't know if it's just across the community, but of course it's circling around across the community. I think they were looking to raise 300,000. They're well surpassed that. And, you know, without being overly morbid about the situation, like funeral costs and all of that sort of stuff, getting his body back to Serbia, where his home country is, like, it costs a lot. So if this is one way, like, the CrossFit community can help ease the burden of it all on the family, I think that's an amazing thing. It's just one amazing thing that the CrossFit community is. I think when you watch all the news reports of the fire department and the police department and just news outlets, a lot of people have touched on the fact that the CrossFit community is so close. So I hope that this doesn't divide the community, and if it can bring the community back together. Were you gonna say something?
I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Everyone a question. Do you think that by CrossFit taking accountability, one person in particular or several people that are in management of HQ should take accountability and step down. Do you think that's a solution? Because a lot of people are asking that too.
It depends, if let's say it's Don Fall, for example, and he goes, I don't want to put X money into the health and safety budget at the CrossFit Games, and that is a direct representative of why X happened at the Games, which is Lazar Ðukić's death, then yeah, he should take the fall.
Right.
I mean, also, if you just got a bunch of yes men underneath you, then yes, maybe that also needs to change as well. But again, I'll wait until that day comes, and when we find out that information, if we ever get our hands on it. But until then, yeah, I don't know what really needs to change. Like, I know a lot of people have said, like, get rid of Castro because he's an idiot for putting the swim after the run.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
No, me neither.
I think the only thing I disagree with Dave Castro is like his silly handwriting on a whiteboard, which makes the sport look really budget every now and then. But otherwise, I quite like him as a personality within the sport. I think the sport lacks a personality because of its lack of professionalism.
Right.
If it was if everything else is very professionalized and Castro existed the way that he does, I feel like he would be like a misfit within it, and he wouldn't fit.
Right.
But because of the way that the sport is, I think he actually suits it very well. And I quite enjoy Castro's, childish banter every now and then. I actually quite like that. But like I said, if the sport wants to move to like the professional era, then he would either have to adapt and evolve with it, or you would have to bring someone else in. And we actually got someone actually asked that question, should Dave Castro resign? I don't think he should resign because of the death of Lazar Ðukić. I don't believe it's directly his fault unless the investigation shows it is. But yeah, like you said, I think any workout is unsafe if the health and safety protocols are not in place. So
100%.
I think he's probably the easiest person to point
He's
a
like your
finger
fall
to
guy,
because he's there. Because he's the face you see all the time. So I mean, I think most people don't even know what the CEO's name is probably. So
Don't fall.
there you go. I knew that, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on this. I think there's always like a scapegoat or someone that needs to resign just for the sake of it. But then nothing changes.
No.
So if something needs to change, I think the right person needs to take a step back. If it's not, then I don't think it's going to make a difference. I don't think any one person should be blamed unless there's an apparent reason from the investigation that says that person should be blamed. So I don't know the right answer for this. I don't have an answer for this.
All right. We're going to wrap it up with your top 3 moments of the CrossFit Games. I want this to be a celebration, not something that's morbid. But we're going to go around the room. It doesn't have to necessarily be in order if you don't want it. Top 3 moments also doesn't have to be someone crushing it. It might just be something that stands out in your head. Like I know you've already said the Brent Fikowski falling short in the last 2 workouts. Maybe that's it. Or maybe you say Austin Hatfield crushing the last 2 workouts. We're going to go around the room with 1 each and then come back around. Schalk, I know you've done your research at the CrossFit Games. If you need to hit pass 3 times in a row, you can. But Karan, we're going to start with you, and then we're going to move to your right, which is going to be back to Meg.
So I think in no particular order, my first one.
You just get one right now, then we're going to
yeah. My first one for the round is the workout Chad. For me, it inspired Sarah Wilkinson's speech, touched my heart, and with everything that happened over the weekend, that was just definitely a significant moment for me.
I think it was cool that you also chose to do the workout afterwards. Have you washed my Go Right bag?
I have not, but it's
cool. So
out downstairs drying.
Throw that into a bonfire then. Okay, cool. Meg?
I think for me, my number 1 would be watching Cara Saunders do her final CrossFit Games appearance. So I really enjoyed how she carried herself and how the team came together.
Yeah. Also, mum of 2.
Of 2.
And
on the podium.
And just a legend within CrossFit, to be honest.
So I enjoyed that.
I think my number one, one of my top 3, let's put it that way, was watching Alexis Raptis drop the hammer on lap 3 of 4 on the 1,600 meter run, the mile run, and then getting to the final lap and then ringing the bell and she going, holy fuck, I still got another whole lap to run. and then still holding off Brooke Wells. I was
Yeah.
actually, that was bloody good. And actually still had a ridiculously good time with that. Like, very, props to her. That was awesome.
It made that last final lap very interesting.
Oh, I know. God, I was hurting
engaged.
for her. Yeah. Schalk.
I've got one
Yeah, go
from
for
the
it.
event that I actually watched. I do apologize. I lost
Yeah.
a bit of interest after event one.
Yes.
I did watch one though. I think Ricky Garrard sprinting
Yeah.
and catching up with James Sprague. I was quite shocked.
He was on the travelator, James Sprague.
Quite shocked at how slow James Sprague was in his final
He was
his
moving
final sprint.
backwards. Yes.
But that was the thing that I
That was actually very cool.
yeah,
That was very cool to see.
good to watch.
Karan.
Yeah, I think for me, the track and field event stood out to me as well, with people going sub 5 in the men's and sub 5:30 in the women's, given the fact that it was after 1,000 box step-ups, what's capable.
And after 100 deadlifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Lower back.
100
Yeah.
GHDs. Yeah.
So that was pretty cool to see what, I guess, I mean, every year we see what CrossFit or CrossFitters are capable of. And that was pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah.
The times for a mile run. Yeah.
Nice.
Another highlight for me was seeing Haley Adams back.
Yeah.
I was so hoping she'd get onto the podium. I thought that would be a really nice way for her to
Yeah.
have her like come back here.
Yeah.
And
It's definitely good
Yeah.
to see her in a good headspace
Yep.
and like happy
Yeah.
as well. That was really cool.
she looks healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's really, really nice to see as well.
I think my next one would be just Tia Toomey fucking crushing it, like absolutely wiping the floor with everyone. Like, I know people say it's boring that the same person wins, but I think it's amazing to watch her do that and just completely clean up. But like, you're not even. Oh, maybe no.
No.
It's like not happening. Like, she is just literally destroying everyone. I think that's really cool to see. So well done, Tia Toomey.
Yeah.
Schalk, do you have a second one you want
I
to?
would have to skip the
No.
second and
Okay,
third
cool.
now.
Back to you,
Sorry.
Karan, for your last one.
For me, it'd be the having the Canadians podium. I've been backing Emily Rolfe to podium for quite a while now. I'm
Have you?
happy.
Oh, because she's an endurance athlete.
Yeah, you know.
Yes, of course.
Let's not get into specifics, please. But yeah, watching her podium was quite nice. Seeing Vellner climb his way back up after a 30-something in event one, like he always does every year.
Yeah.
And then Brent as well. Was hoping he'd win.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Canadians doing well overall.
Yeah.
Quite enjoyed that.
Nice. Meg, your last one, if you got one.
I don't have another one.
Don't have another one?
Off the top of my head.
Damn, you put me on the spot now. You are putting me on the spot. I think my one will probably go to my boy Brent. I'm pretty gutted for him that he didn't win it. Yeah, damn, he came 11th and 20th in the last two events.
Yeah.
I mean, he was fighting tooth and nail on those 135 thrusters, and he failed to bar muscle up as well. Like,
Yeah.
tough to watch, but also like, you know, in the same thing, like fair play to James Sprague. Like, I actually thought he was down and out. He was like hands on knees at one point, sitting in a squat, and I was like, oh damn, he's also not going to get the podium. I thought Dylan Pepper was going to do it, and then suddenly James Sprague out of nowhere took a 5th and a 4th on the last two events, which is very impressive. But yeah, I think, God, it sounds terrible, but the collapse of Brent Fikowski. So I mean, hopefully he comes back again next year and crushes it. But I did really want to see Brent take home the gold this year.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. I think just before we do wrap up, just another mention again, for those people that do have the ability or would like to donate to the Lazar Ðukić Fund, please find the link down below. It is a GoFundMe link. Anything that you can donate would greatly help out the Ðukić family, and hopefully go some way to easing the immense burden that they have on their family right now. Otherwise, thank you very much, you three, for joining me in the studio today. Unfortunately, I will not be hosting next week because I will be at the Legends or Masters games in Alabama with Lee Coates and Greg Gertis and Luke DeVoe representing the process. So I will see you guys in 3 weeks' time. Bye-bye.